Everybody, welcome to Colin's Backstage Pass, and I'm your host, Colin First, where every week we sit down with the best of the best in the Lake Norman area, from musicians and bands to venue owners and to significant music folks in the area. And I am very excited this week to have my friend David Waggoner from Lake Norman Brewery in Denver. We've had some technical issues here, but I think we're going to make it through.
I heard about half of it.
We'll see what we can do in the editing and try to get rid of that.
Well, most of the technical issues are on my end. I had to change laptops. I had to change locations, and here we are.
There you go. Excellent. I'm going to guess that you have not been a beer brewery owner most of your life. So take us through what happened one day and you said, you know what? I want to start a brewery.
So I have never been a brewer, have never professed to be a brewer, but I'm a mechanical engineer, and my whole career I worked for Charlotte Pipe for 33 years, big iron foundry in Charlotte that recently moved out of town. But I was watching I was doing a lot of capital projects and watching all these contractors just kill it. And I told my wife, I said, heck, I can do that. So I studied and got my contractor's license. And so now one of my jobs, other than running a brewery, is I like to build houses on the side. So I bought the lot beside me on Lake Norman and built this house. And the first couple that bought it became my best friends. And unfortunately, they got divorced and moved away. And then the next family, yeah, I know, right? And then the next family that bought it is my partner, Dan. So we literally live side by side. And he had been brewing for 30 years in his basement up in Northern Virginia, DC area. And right after they moved in, he started bringing little kegs down from his upstate Virginia house. And we were all on Ashley Lane where we live going, my goodness, your craft beer is actually good for a home brewer. So I started elbowing him a little bit, and I said, you know what? I said, there's no breweries on the western side of Lake Norman. I said, it's the last frontier. And I was just messing with him, honestly, honest to God. I had no intention of this happening, but he knew I was a contractor, and he went around the lake and then to Charlotte and Belmont, Mount Holly, Newton, to all the local breweries within a certain, radius around us. That means going to breweries and drinking beer and seeing, it's we do it a lot, but it's all for a good cause to make sure we're staying up with the competition. And so he came back a couple weeks later, and he said, hey man, I think I can hang with these other breweries. You want to build me a brewery? And he goes, I bought a lot about 10 minutes from here. And in Lincoln County, it was really interesting at the time. You had to be zoned industrial to build a microbrewery. So there are very few industrial lots. Then it's all about location, where are the demographics and all that. And so we found this 8-acre lot that's, as you know, it sits down in a bowl basically on an old dry pond, which had been, it was a big dam pond at one point. People that grew up here, they're in their mid 70s, remember swimming in it. And so Dry Pond was the name. That's what Denver was named back in the old days. And they renamed it to Denver because they said it could never amount to anything being called Dry Pond. Anyway, that's our flagship. Hazy is our Dry Pond Hazy. So we named it after our dry pond in the backyard. We claim that Dry Pond was named after our pond, which is probably not true, but that's our claim. So anyway, he buys this lot and he says, so you're a contractor. Do you want to build me a brewery? And I said, sure. I mean, I've done commercial work, no problem. Let's look at the plans. And so we got some plans together, and about a couple of days into it, he said, I'm a little nervous about this. This was right before COVID too. We knew nothing about COVID yet, but this was right before COVID. And he said, would you like to partner with me? And I said, I should probably ask my wife, but sure. We did it, and she was a little bit chapped at me, but she got over it. And we built this thing, and we literally opened. Next month June will be 5 years. So we literally opened that thing right when COVID was hitting hard and everyone was freaking out. And I honestly think it was a blessing for us, if that could be a blessing, because we were on 8 acres and our beer garden was, pretty sprawling.
Right.
And people felt like, hey, we can go there, be social, yet sit at these big beer garden tables and spread out and, not worry about anyone catching.
Yep.
And yeah, so it kind of worked. And then after we got into it a few months, I asked him, I said, let's do some live music. And my partner, he goes, I don't know, whatever. So we started with one guy and a guitar, and we still use these guys.
Well, we're going to get to the music. I don't want to jump ahead just yet. We're going to stick on the brewery for a minute. But what I
Okay,
wanted
so
to
we
ask
built.
you, yeah, I always want to ask you and any of the other breweries that I go to, how long does it take to make those massive vats? Because obviously you've got the glass wall there between the bar area and where you make it all. From start to finish, how long does it take to make a flavor?
Right. And if we hadn't had technical difficulty, you'd have all those beautiful stainless steel tanks behind me. Instead, you got the back of my house.
Find some pictures online.
The beautiful thing is it takes home brewers a lot more time to ferment their beer than it does microbreweries. We can make an IPA in about 3 weeks, which is pretty darn quick. It takes a day to build or to brew a batch, a 500-gallon batch. In fact, you can do double batches and brew 1,000 gallons. And once it goes into fermentation process, that's what slows down, because you have to convert all the sugars to alcohol. And once the yeast is done, then you can actually pull the yeast off the bottom, clarify it, and then keg it and carb it. That's for your basic ales, your IPAs, your blondes, which is your favorite. But the cold lagered beers, like our Masthead and Drink Loco, which is a light Mexican lager, our Marzen, which is our German Oktoberfest beer, which we pretty much sell year round. We just changed the name of it. Right. And when we're not in the Oktoberfest time frame, right, those take 2 months because they're cold lagered at 33 degrees. So you're basically holding that fermentation process at 33 degrees to retard the conversion of sugar to alcohol, which changes the flavors. And that's where the cold lagered beer name came from, because back in the old days, you had caves that were full of big giant ice blocks, and they'd go in there and chisel off, a chunk of ice for your house or wherever, whoever needed it. And guess what was in the way back of those? Big fermenters fermenting beer. So it was about 32 to 33 degrees in there, and that's where cold lagering came from. It was probably by accident, but it made a lot of sense, and it makes really good beer. So we carry 3 lagers just about year round.
I love it. I love it. So how many flavors do you keep on tap on a daily, weekly basis?
Normally about 24. Both Dan and I are big IPA fans. So we usually have, a couple hazies. We have 3 hazies right now. Your standard West Coast style IPA, which is what I'm drinking right now, is my favorite. And then we have a double version of the West Coast style. So it's about a 9.5%, and its name is Borrowed Time. Appropriately so. You drink 3 of those, somebody's gonna have to drive you home.
Right. So it's funny you say that, because I've got friends that make fun of me for my light beer. When I'm not drinking at your place, I'm drinking Miller Lite all day long because it doesn't hurt me, right? And I can have a lot. But you get into that 5, 6, 8, 10, 12, 15, percent alcohol. And I got to believe folks that come in for the first time that haven't really been craft beer connoisseurs, they get into 1 or 2 of those and then you're dragging them out. Is there any kind of warning that you give them on the high?
We absolutely do. You can tell. So I can't hear very well. And as you know, especially when we have concerts, it gets very loud in the tap room. I pour beer. So when I look at facial expressions, and when they're looking at that list of 24 beers and they're, about cross-eyed, I'll look at them and I'll go, so what do you like? And if they say, if the first words out of their mouth is Miller Lite, then I say, then you need a Masthead Light Lager. It's 4.2, 4.5%. And it's very light and clean. And it's our number 1 seller for that reason.
Wow.
But it's much lighter than the blonde. The blonde is the 3rd lightest beer we sell.
Okay.
I'll tell you next time we're in.
I might want to do, you guys do the flights, right? You can try a bunch of different ones.
We sure do. We sure do.
Well,
we
everyone
can
watching.
do a tasty.
Yeah, that's the way to go. I love that. All right. So you start this brewery, you get your buddy together, you pick a bunch of flavors, and you open in the middle of COVID. And
Yes.
what are the other things you were trying to do during that time? Because you're not the only venue or the only bar
So
in the Lake Norman area that got crushed by COVID. What did you guys do at that point to kind of make it desirable, interesting, exciting
well,
to come?
we we actually we really didn't get crushed. We honestly thought we were going to be sitting on a cooler of beer outside doing drive-throughs and selling beer to people as they drove through. We had no idea. And I talked to we're in Lincoln County, not Mecklenburg.
Right.
So I talked to the sheriff and I said, this is the deal. We're on 8 acres. We can spread out. Can we actually open? And he said, I have no problem with it as long as, people are following any guidelines that you have in place. So we put the tape on the floor for 6 foot spacing and all that good stuff. And people followed it and went outside and had tons of room to sit. We have a big event room upstairs, and then we have our tap room. So there's tons of places for people to sit. So the weekend we opened, there was so much buzz and anticipation about it. We had brewed as much as we possibly could and got ready 8 beers. And
Wow.
on Friday we opened, and on Sunday when we closed, we had 4 beers left, four types of beers left, and we were almost out of beer. So we were, running like crazy. We didn't have we had our 3 barrel system going, that's a 90-gallon batch. That's what we do for small batches. That's all we had.
Wow.
But there's nothing for anyone to do. So they blew us out of the water. And once we got the 500-gallon system going, we started rolling. And then 2 years later, we doubled fermentation again so that we won't ever have any issues again.
Wow. And how long can beer stay in those holding tanks?
They can stay in the fermenters for, oh gosh, I'd say sometimes 6 weeks we'll hold them, because if we're not, like in the wintertime, if we're not emptying kegs fast enough, and
Right.
beer, our outside beer sales also drop because everybody's at home eating tomato soup and grilled cheese. So we will hold it longer, but we won't brew as much either in the wintertime. But I'd say, a good month at least. And then once it's kegged, it lasts. The heavier the beer, like our Christmas ale, it lasts indefinitely without any preservatives. That's the key thing that I think people don't realize is microbrew beer is as fresh as it gets, and it has no preservatives. It's not pasteurized. It's the real deal. And that's why they like it so much. We literally will keg something today and put it on tap that night. It doesn't
Wow.
get any better than that.
No, no kidding. I love that. I love that. All right. So let's jump into the music. You mentioned when you first started, you had, acoustic players and all that. What kind of started? I know you're a music fan because I see you out there taking videos and pictures every show. You're probably the biggest fan in the room. But, what was the catalyst to saying, hey, we should probably have some music, and then how it expanded to what it is today?
Just to give you a little background on my partner, I'm Gen X and so is he. So we both grew up, of course, in separate parts of the country, but I'm a Charlotte boy, and old Cricket Arena back then was called the Charlotte Coliseum. So
Right.
Rush, Van Halen, AC/DC, Ozzy Osbourne, Metallica. I watched Metallica warm up for Cheap Trick, and everybody was like, who is that? So that's them. It, I love 80s tribute bands, as you know. But I also love alt rock. I love country. I love all music. I just love watching these performers play, because it just absolutely amazes me how talented these people are. And they know the words to all these songs too. They're not up there on an iPad sitting there reading the words. It
Right.
just
It's not
amazes
karaoke
me.
night.
And my good buddy, oh heck no, my good buddy Ray Tyson from Delta Fire, I was bickering with him one day about cost, because everyone wants to raise the cost of the bands all the time. And he reminded me, he goes, look, you're not paying me to play. You're paying me to set up and break down. He goes, we absolutely love to play in front of people. And I never thought of it that way, but it's so true. It's just,
No, he's spot on.
that just totally, that reset the way I think about everything when I'm booking bands.
Yeah. No, that's true. I mean, that is actually the hardest part of the show for most of the bands that I've worked with, at least. It's a couple hours before, it's an hour and change after, 4 or 5 hours being there already. Yeah,
Yeah.
the breakdown was probably the hardest part of the whole show, right? At
No,
midnight or whatever,
absolutely.
going home.
Oh
So
yeah, in our tap room, we're going like, "You want us to leave the lights on? We're out." Because it takes them an hour to close after everything's done, and it takes you guys hours to wrap all that stuff up and put it away properly.
right. So when you started, you had an acoustic spot, if I remember, by the front door is where
We did.
they kind of hang out, and then you moved them outside. And we'll get to
We
the
did.
stage in a minute. But what was the catalyst to being? Let's get another space here because we want bigger bands now.
Right. So the evolution was we started people out inside the tap room by the front door, and it literally was a guy, guitar, and John Sullivan was one of those guys, and he
Yep.
absolutely packed the house.
Right.
And it started like that, and then we would put them outside in the beer garden. Then the beer garden would just pack, and nobody would be in the tap room. Well, we can hold a lot more people in the beer garden, so that
Right.
real quickly we're like, okay, we need to move the music outside. And then we started with bands like Delta Fire. They're great bands, but they are a full band and they make a little bit more noise.
Right.
We had them with their backs against the tap room exterior wall
Right. Right.
facing out. Meanwhile, they're building a 55 and up retirement community. I mean, it's through the woods, but
Right.
still they can hear. So we started getting a little bit of noise complaints. And I said, okay, we'll take them and rotate them 90 degrees and put them where all the stages were when we rented the stages, right
Right.
there at the beer window on the side of the building.
Yep.
So
Yep.
now we're pointing out towards Highway 16 and the Sitco, and it seemed like that really helped, unless Blue Monday or Euphonic or one of
The
the
bigger bands.
Carlo, one of the really big bands came in. But I will say, I think what really put us on the map, again, we were right smack dab in the middle of COVID. And again, I talked to the sheriff, everything was cool. I told him what I was working on. A good friend of mine at Charlotte Pike, my day job, he said, "Hey man, I'm the sound guy for DeCarlo." And I said, "Who's that?" And he said, "They're kind of a Boston band." And I listened to a
Right.
little bit of the music. And the next thing you know, they're out there and we're talking. They said, "We've got nowhere to play. There's absolutely nowhere to play. Could we play here?" And I said, "Sure, I guess." I mean, I was clueless. And we stopped. It was a ticket. We did do a ticketed event at their request, and I think they're $10, whatever. And we stopped selling tickets at 650, and people were still pouring in. And this is in the middle of COVID, and people were just slamming there, not one mask, and we're going to be on the news tomorrow. But it turned out great. Everyone got to let their hair down because, there's all that stress with COVID, and everyone just got together, and it was just one big giant fellowship of great rock and roll music and people just having a great time. And for me, that is the biggest payment of anything, is watching the people smile and dancing. They're holding their cameras up like we used to hold lighters up at the Charlotte Coliseum for playing, when they're playing Limelight from Rush or something like that. It's just great. And the funny thing is, I used to pay $10 to $15 to see those guys
Right.
for real back in 1982.
Yeah.
And now we're charging the same price to see these great tribute bands for the same price.
Yeah.
Now,
No, I love it.
tribute bands are not all created equal, as we know, but I've learned I could write a book about all that, but we have had a great time so far. We really
Yeah.
have. And you've taught me a lot as well.
I appreciate that. And obviously, the next thing I was going to talk about is the stage, because in my opinion, that's really what pushed you guys over the line from not just a brewery, but an actual live music venue. Because as someone who's been a band manager, a stage it makes a difference between noise over here or actually I'm here to see the band.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you did an amazing job with the stage. I love it. I know we had many conversations about, what would you need, how much power, space, and all that. And you really did an amazing job. I know it took a little longer. I don't want to spend a lot of time on that. It was a little longer to get it ready than you probably had hoped, but I think the end result is just amazing. For anybody watching, if you haven't been there, and it's really a sight to see. I mean, the stage itself is just pretty. It's a great looking piece of art, if you will. I mean, the roof and with the trees behind it and everything you guys did with that, so impressed with that. And certainly I know the bands love playing there. But I want to talk about, you talked about the bands, all tributes are not created equal. One of the reasons I put this together is obviously there are a lot of bands in this area,
Right.
probably many dozens of bands. And let's be honest, they're all not tier A bands yet, and they all want to
Right.
be. So you've got this challenge where you probably, and I think you joked with me the other day. I said, "How do I get in touch with you to schedule this?" And you said, "Text me because I get too many emails."
I do.
And I'm sure that's true. So you get all these emails from all these bands, probably good chunk of them you've never even heard of before. How do you make a decision?
I probably miss 75% of the bands that email me, but sometimes my taproom manager will see one and go, "Hey, I know this band. Check them out." I mean, I spend so much time, especially on the weekends, like when I'm sitting out on this back deck looking
Right.
out at the lake, I'm drinking coffee and listening to clips. That's what I do because you have to decide, is this what your majority of customers want to hear? And then it's price point, negotiation, all that good stuff. But at the end of the day, I tell them, you got to have a good social media platform because we have 10, 15,000 followers and I have a great social media guy, but
Yep.
we can't do it all. We really
Right.
can't. We have some bands that don't play nearly as often.
Mhm.
It's a tribute band and they hammer social media for 6 to 8 weeks before our day.
Yeah.
And they outsell everyone else by far because most bands play Friday and Saturday, Friday, Saturday, Friday, Saturday. And I get it. You don't want to be slamming, you're playing at Lake Norman Brewery 3 weeks from now if you've got 5 other gigs before that. And I totally understand that. But it does make a difference. It
Yeah.
really does. And that's why we put our concert series out there so people can see and make plans because we want them to mark us down on their calendar before they do another venue. Because especially when we do these big concerts and we're doing more of them this year, people will absolutely mark it down that, hey, we're going to that. And of course they have to they watch the weather. I've learned my lesson. My wife will say, we've only sold one ticket and it's Monday. And I said, look at the weather. The weather forecast looks great. And usually about Thursday, Friday, it just starts ramping up. And,
Right.
and then the day of, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say most of the venues that used to see a high pre-sale number because there was risk they couldn't get in, right? There
Yeah.
was always, we're going to stop selling tickets at whatever number. I don't, and that's just not just you. This is a lot of the other venues that pre-sell. I don't know. That's a thermometer anymore, if you will. Pre-sale is generally going to tell you how well they do until they start their first song, and then the
Yeah.
place is packed. And actually, from a band's perspective, you might not want me to say this out loud, but we don't want pre-sale
Right.
because the pre-sale is a little bit less. And it's
Sure.
good from a forecasting perspective, but we'd rather everybody pay at the door and probably cash for you, right? If they can do it.
Yeah.
So that no credit card fees in there. But people ask me all the time, what's the best scenario? Should I buy a ticket or not? I'm like, you know what? I don't think this is going to sell out. So I would just rather you show up at the door. And I know that makes folks nervous. So I'm not trying to hurt venues' feelings, but if the band's getting paid, if their deal is, part of the door, I'm going to tell everybody you show up that night and you get your ticket then. So
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have to be pretty laid back about it or it can just consume you. I am a weather expert now. I study, I have multiple radar apps. I study them like you wouldn't believe to predict what our sales are going to be. And I can just about tell you what our
Right.
sales will be now because I've been doing it so long.
Right. What I heard you say was they need to have good social media. They
Yeah,
need to advertise. But
they
I
do.
would also say they probably need to play music that you feel is going to be relevant to your demographic, you know?
Absolutely.
And there's probably a lot of that. So I'm not going to say it's all 80s or all country or all this, but I would say to other bands that ask me, you've got to play something that fits the venue.
Absolutely. I mean, Southern rock, tribute, big hair rock, alt
Mhm.
rock, country, everything plays well. If I bring in strictly a blues band, it's going to be lower attendance, but the people that are there love it. And if the price point's fine, that's fine. Cause we will not do ticketed events every weekend because it makes our customers mad.
Yeah.
We're a big German style beer garden first
Right.
that has entertainment. And that's why I have upped the bar on what a band can charge us before we create ticket sales because it, throws everything into a tizzy with staffing and my wife
Sure.
works the gate. Oh my gosh.
I know she
Um,
does.
so
She
I
put my
hear
wrist out last weekend.
Yeah. And I've learned, those bands that are just underneath, that are that good, and they're just underneath where you would charge tickets. If you don't charge tickets, they'll pack the house and our beer sales go through the roof. So like I said, I could write a book because I've talked to more bands and I've coached. I mean, I'm not a musician, but I've coached them on what they need to do to help get better. We don't have sound. One day we're going to do it, but the old adage, ready, fire, aim. We did not. I mean, I'm a mechanical engineer and I love hi-fi, Wi-Fi. I love it. I love it, but we didn't want to just do it, but we've got hollow tubes underneath the ground for running anything we need to do in the future. As Blue Monday, and I think even Euphonics did one time. One time we had Peyton and the lead singer from Heart doing a duet, and they tripped my breakers when they were playing. I think they were playing Barracuda.
Right.
They're playing Barracuda. They hit the high notes, and all of a sudden the power went out.
Stacy.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I could not breathe. I was just to myself trying to reset breakers. What happened? Oh my Lord. And meanwhile, the drummer is just back there sort of playing a little acoustical. It was sad. So
I remember that when the stage was on the side and you have those two quad boxes on the corner.
Yeah.
And I was running stuff back to the AC units because I knew we were not going to have the power.
Exactly. We had an amp meters. We had amp meters. So I could stand there and watch and say, hey, you're pulling. I mean, one band, I remember they set up one time and they were drawing 15 amps just sitting there. And I went, you're not doing anything. What's wrong? Y'all got a ground. What's the deal?
Right.
Yeah.
I get it.
It's funny.
We're getting to the end of time, but I wanted to say a couple of things. I want to thank you for being our partner in Rock the Lake. And I know last year we kind of threw that thing together and it was still a fantastic success. I know you weren't there. We're going to hold you to being there this year.
Oh, I'll be there.
But we're seeing a tremendous amount of excitement again this year. I know it's a Sunday. I know it's going to put you and your staff, to the wall kind of thing. It's going to be a crazy day, but we appreciate you and your partnership and just working with us. And hopefully we can do this, 50 more times, however it outlives us all. That would be a great story to tell. Right. So I just to say thank you and encourage everybody. If you haven't gone out to the Rock the Lake website or the Lake Norman Brewery website, all the details are there. September 21st. It's an amazing venue. It's going to be cold beer all day. No running out of beer this time.
No,
right, Dave? No running out of beer.
I'll be there. Don't worry. I was at an Ole Miss game watching. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm missing the biggest event we've ever done. It was killing me. It was killing me.
Right.
Yeah, actually, the band list was released today, I believe.
Yeah, that should be out.
So
and
check it out.
Social media, everyone was sharing it too. I love that the bands got engaged and put it on their pages too. So I know we got some time. This will be out many months before Rock the Lake, and there's a lot more opportunity for folks to check that out. But I just want to say thank you for that. Thank you for your partnership. I've enjoyed working with you all these years and the number of bands that I've worked with, and always appreciate you putting us on the schedule. I know you get slammed on a regular basis. So to be on your short list, to get a phone call back, it means a lot to me. So
I'll never forget the quality bands that got us where we are now. We helped, Denver isn't even a city, but I think, helped put Denver on the map. I've heard that many times. We've been called the gym, the diamond in the rough, whatever you want to call it, because we're definitely not fancy. We're just laid back and people love it. They just love hanging out at our brewery. And that's what makes me happy. So
sure is. Amazing beer. You always have food trucks there. Absolutely. I know you've got that music trivia or bingo during the week. I know on the weekends you also do the car clubs and all that. There was always something to do at Lake Norman Brewery. So if you have not been there yet, put it on your schedule. Make sure you guys get out there. David, thank you again, my friend. I look forward to seeing you soon, and we will see you at the next show.
Absolutely, sir. Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.